Women in Leadership Global is proud to honour an outstanding female each month, recognising women who embody leadership excellence and are shaping the future of our industry. This month's recipient is Carla Antunes da Silva, Chief Executive Officer of Lloyds Bank Corporate Markets. And Carla, I am delighted to be honouring you and recognising you for your incredible track record in the industry. So thank you. Thank you for receiving the award so gracefully.
Thank you. And thank you, Georgie, for thinking of me and for giving me this opportunity.
And it's interesting because we love to honour extraordinary women in the industry, and we also want to learn from you, because I think often people can look at leaders and can assume there's been a linear career path, and we all know there are many events, challenges, experiences that have shaped that journey. And so I would love to hear from you today to capture some of those sound bites, because they can also inform and help shape the other leaders' trajectories. I'm often asked, like, what is the secret sauce, when we look at extraordinary leaders? So I want to start by asking you about your morning, because there's a great saying, win the morning, win the day. What does your first 30 minutes of the day look like?
So a little bit about myself. I started my career as an equity analyst. And as an equity analyst, I did that for 18 years. And I woke up at 5:08, because I had timed my exact moment to leave the house at 6 o'clock for 18 years. And so I thought there was no interesting jobs that started after 6:30 in the morning. What that means is that I've become a real morning person. Today I don't. I find myself having a bit of a lie-in when I get up at, say, 6:30, 6:15. But I am a very much a morning person. In fact, I am not an evening person, and I get quite grumpy in the evening if I'm past 8 o'clock and working. So I would not have done well in M&A. So I do actually think that part of the success, at least initially, was that I was just working according to my biologic clock that actually functioned.
Yes.
Today, what do I do? When I can, and I am really sacred about this, I save 2 mornings a week to do my favorite thing, which are bar classes. I think I've mentioned that to you before.
Yes.
It's an amazing 7 o'clock class. I've timed it perfection. I can get in by 8:30, and that just starts my day. And I feel great those days that I am able to do that. Not every day is like that, so that's like a perfect day. Other than that, what I can't do is miss breakfast. So that's probably my only thing I do sort of religiously. I can't miss breakfast. And then I get going. But it just so helps that I'm a morning person.
And you talked about that perfect day and bar being part of that perfect day. How do you protect the space? Many demands of your time. How do you protect that space so that perfect day is a reality where it can be 2 days a week?
Okay, so I didn't say I have 2 perfect days a week. So can I just make sure everybody realizes that is not what happens? By 9 o'clock, I've had a perfect day. Maybe by 9:30, that's changed. But it does get me in the right mindset. And I think the most important thing is I have a sort of few more things, and they're all sort of simple tricks just to make sure you protect some time. I'm a stickler for putting in the top, and I think I've mentioned and share that with you, which is I put the number of hours of meetings in the top of the day.
Yeah.
And I have a danger zone, like an amber red zone. When it gets to 7 hours, I know I'm going to be in trouble. So I just go in there and I take something out and chop it out, because actually time, like everything, fits whatever you allocate to it. So that's one aspect of it. And I also know, and probably resonates with many people, by the time an issue comes into my office, it's a problem. Because if it isn't a problem, it's been solved before. So if you've got the mindset of, okay, whatever comes in, you diagnose pretty quickly, is this bodily harm? Is this just a nuisance? Can we find a way? And then the most interesting thing that I really find is then that problem solving. Sometimes you just have people coming in, all they need is actually to explain it. And then you if you're able to help them in that solution. But yeah, that perfect day doesn't always last. So you have to keep coming back to it. Yeah.
But I really interesting what you said there about, that intentionality around tracking your hours of like number of meetings, knowing how important space is. And there's a great law, I think it's called Parkinson's law, which is like work will fit the space you make available to it. So we have to be intentional at protecting that space. And I love what you say, there is a danger zone, i.e. then in that space, my mental acuity is not going to be where it needs to be, or decision making could be, you're not necessarily going to be operating at your best. So it's knowing what systems you need in place.
Absolutely. I actually do, to the horror of my PA, I actually go in and change things and start moving them around. She goes crazy on that. Um, I always try to look 2 weeks ahead so that I'm sort of tracking
Okay.
2 weeks ahead as well. So I do actually do a bit of that, and make sure that you have a proper, not that I have a full hour lunch, but I have a proper break during half mid through the day, so an hour for that, and then not, if you can, not have back to back more than 3 hours as well. It's just you just have to recognize that our bodies weren't done, and especially with screen time, we are not built for having 3-4 hours without moving, without getting up, without looking outside. And I think those are the small things that you can control, because otherwise you can't control everything else. Actually, you can't
Mm.
coming up in the meeting. So maybe it's a false sense of control, Georgie, maybe.
But I think it's that I remember someone sharing a quote with me, like sunlight before screen light. And I really try and honor that as well, because if we look at our phones first things in the day, you talk about devices, we can get derailed emotionally and energetically before the day's even started. So we're then, setting ourselves up for the perfect day is completely unrealistic then. You said breakfast. What's your perfect breakfast or your favorite breakfast?
Well, I mean, on the weekend, it's a proper orange juice, a proper, probably some toast and whatever. Actually, now I'm really into yogurt with granola and a bit of honey. That is as simple as that, but that's all I need. That and a tea, and that's probably, recognizing I've been in the UK for 32 years. Tea is my go-to drink, which obviously when I'm not in the UK and I go to the continent, they're like, do you want the milk cold or hot? And do you want so but no, it's very simple. I know there's a lot of people who believe in this whole fasting and whatever. I am just not good on that, but everybody's different.
Yeah, and I think it's recognizing your own body, isn't it? Because I used to love fasting, but I'm in a hormonal place in my life. I think they call it the midpoint, where my body just doesn't like. I'm hungry. I need hormone regulation, and that includes having a good start to the day, which is a breakfast.
Correct. So to me, that's energy. That's actually it's my favorite meal of the day. So I'm not going to give up on that.
And you talk about you mentioned the word devices a minute ago, and I want to circle back to that because there are so many things competing for our attention, our time, and and our energy. How do you make sure that you kind of own your device rather than your device owns you?
Easier said than done. My thing about so I'm not on social media. I think that helps a lot. I've consciously never been on social media, and maybe that's been, now that you have so much research to say how bad that is in terms of mental health. It didn't take much to understand that if your recognition, or you were looking for approval with those things, that's just not going to be good for your mental health. The app that I sort of turn to probably during the day is the WhatsApp, to make sure that everybody, at least from a family point of view, everyone is okay. But and maybe this is my training as in the markets. If you're able to detach and take a sort of more of a view with, every hour you check rather than every minute, you'll still get what's happening, but you don't get that anxiety. And that's probably the best thing that one can do.
It's because again, there's always going to be something happening every minute. But I my parents, when I grew up, they had the news, the morning news, lunchtime news, evening news, the 9 p.m. news. It's and but now it's that constant stream and flow, and to your point, I think it can really stir anxiety in people unless you make a conscious choice about how regularly you're going to engage.
Yeah, I do. I mean, in the morning, and again, I do read the news first thing. So when I'm coming in, I already have read all the news, and I've got certain news feeds that I'll go to, and they're quite broad range because I don't like to sort of have that narrow vision. Otherwise, you can, pretend you're living in a parallel world. But you don't need to be constantly. And actually, I used to also have obviously the Bloomberg and the share prices and whatever. So that was, what was constantly going. And you just need to know how to take a little bit of a distance from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it has to, I think the for me is conscious intentionality. Like we have to be the agent of that because no one's going to do it for us.
Correct. Correct.
And look, as you look, you've had an extraordinary career in the industry. As you look back, there are often people that have been part of that. So, who have been your mentors, and what have they taught you that stayed with you?
I think everyone owes their path, and I'll be sort of humble about whether that's successful, but their path to people that have helped them, and I think that's something that then we need to recognize, and increasingly I do that more and more, and actually, especially for younger people. If somebody young asks me and they're in their first job or whatever, I will go out of my way to try to help, because I do recognize that that is the period of time that you can really either lift somebody, or their sort of confidence really gets shattered at that moment. So that would be the first. I I actually go back prior to starting to work, and the person I always sort of have an enormous gratitude for was my headmaster at age 16, who so my background is I'm Portuguese by birth. I went to an English school at age 3, but my parents didn't speak a word of English. I went because it was the revolution, and so they wanted to prepare me in case we had to leave the country. Fast forward, I'm now 17, was going to do economics in Lisbon, and he asks me, or he suggests, I think you should go to Oxford, he said. And I go home and I tell my parents, and they're like, well, I guess you're going to have to try both, and you're going to apply to both. And if you get in, then we'll decide. That was the proverbial sliding door moment for me. And with that, and I came to the UK in 92, not knowing a living soul, absolutely loved. I didn't know what a college was. I didn't even know that they didn't do economics. So I ended up doing PP. Again, a course I loved, but it was also accidental. So I do think there are those accidental people who don't even realize the impact they have on your life. That wasn't a career mentor, but it was somebody who just opened the door and meant that from then onwards, everything was possible and achievable. And I gave that confidence. Throughout, I've been lucky. I've also had many bad bosses, but those bad bosses are equally good because you learn with them. And it is nothing like it's like having a bad teacher. When you have a bad teacher or a bad boss, they are actually gold dust because you learn what you don't want to be. So I wouldn't say there's been a single. I've been very lucky along the way to have people who supported me, and hopefully I've helped them as well. So it's been a joint effort. But you do recognize that sometimes you can really have an impact on people's career. And I think young people is really where it should be at.
I completely agree. And it's interesting there you said about accidental people. And that really chimes, because I think sometimes people don't know, unless we tell them, they don't know the impact that they've had on our lives. And I just love that phrase, accidental people, because we've all got traditional mentors, but those inflection points or those sliding doors that, can be so critical. You mentioned bad bosses. There was a great HBR about bad boss traits. What is it, if you recall back, what's one thing you learned about what not to do?
I think the most important, first of all, bad bosses, they come in very different shapes and sizes. The most important thing are people who are not actually knowledgeable in their field. And you're then talking either to some very technical people or very analytical people, very knowledgeable people, and immediately you can see past that. So whether that is pretending, sort of being well beyond your capabilities and not having the modesty or the humility to say, look, actually, this is not something I can do. Because then what do they say? That some of the worst decisions people make are when they think they know what they're going to do, what they're doing, and then they just don't, and they don't have the depth or even the intent of understanding something. So that's a pretty bad trait. Obviously, you have bad bosses in the terms of, wrong values, wrong culture, etc. So you've got that camp as well. Luckily, I think increasingly banking has got less and less of that. But one recalls and one sees some of those. That I consider that as well. And then the third trait is just not using your responsibility, your power or whatever it is, influence responsibly. You are in a position of authority, of impact, of whatever that is. And that could be a teacher, that could be a doctor, that could be a manager, it could be anything. You owe people the respect and time that role gives you. So I think that's probably the majority. People don't even realize, and they're not trained to be managers. People don't get trained. Sometimes they just happen to be good at whatever, and but there should be more conscious training about what leadership is actually. And I know that you write a lot about it. People should actually spend time, instead of just their mandatory training, which we do every quarter, should involve what does the right leadership looks like.
Because I think, Is often it's not even a step change, it's a staircase change, and managing people, people are complex. There are so many aspects that come in, and often people are expected to figure it out, to your point, without given the appropriate training, because again, there are tools that you need in order to make you effective and influential in the seat. And I think what I want to just underscore something you said there, which I think is really important for everyone. It's about being a learn it all, not a know it all. Bring that curiosity, whether it's, not just within leadership, but within your role. What are the things I might be missing? What am I not understanding? And because that curiosity, and even when, you talked about the junior people, be curious, ask lots of questions, be that porous sponge, because often people do want to help you.
Absolutely. I normally say, and I tell this to my team, I say, the best meeting of my day is when I change my mind. And the reason that happens is because I've learned something different. I've seen a different point of view, and I might have had a set of assumptions going into a meeting. And actually, it's so energizing. It might have been a really difficult, crunchy issue. They come in, they do that, and we change our mind, which means we're making a better decision. And that may be sort of, you can call it curiosity. It also means you have to be open-minded to different views. Very often people just stick to something, and it's like almost like if it's the ego sort of that will. I think it's the opposite. I think people who are strong and who are willing to change, who are willing to see something else. I love that. It's excellent.
Yeah, I think open-minded as a mindset, as a characteristic, is so incredibly important, because often people have this narrow aperture of the way they see things, and they'll say they're open-minded, but they're still open-minded within their narrow aperture. And I
Within
often
their
use
lane, within their swim lane.
and I beach ball, when you're a child, you have the beach ball. It has the blue, the white, like an orange. It has lots of different segments, and often people are looking at it and they see blue and green, but you're yellow and white, and which is why it's a bit like, to take a step back, be curious, look around, because actually there are things you will be missing. And one of the questions that really kind of struck me as I'm listening to you have such poise and confidence in the way you present and the way that you speak. And I often, with the leaders that I work with, especially the ones who are kind of early stages in their career, they have moments of self-doubt, and there is an initial reaction of like, okay, well, and actually it's like, but self-doubt is a journey, like it's, and so do you ever have moments of a confidence wobble, and what have you done in those moments?
Uh, Definitely. First of all, I think the most important thing, and when I sort of have those, I always go back to this point, which is how well prepared am I, and how much do I know about this subject? And frankly, if it's a subject that I know more than most people in that room, then there is no reason to have self-doubt or not to have the confidence. And then what you're there for is actually to explain. Communication is probably one of the things that is most important as you go through your career. I was lucky that at the start of my career, I had training with actual. I got filmed a little bit like this, but then you got sort of talked to, and they would put it up on a screen. I mean, it was daunting. I was probably 25 years old. They did a filming. They had the film crew come in, and you realize, oh my God, that is not what I think I thought I was sounding like. And it's brilliant because it just lays it bare, and it's a little bit therapeutic, if not traumatic, probably both. And then you decide what works for you, and each person has their own style. I don't like talking with paper. I don't like engaging sort of in a very structured way. I like to be free flowing, but I like to have prepared. In order to be free flowing, I've prepared a lot. So it's that. I think the key for anyone who's doing, especially public speaking, but starting to have more of that sort of stage presence, because everybody will be on stage. And it's an animal kingdom. We all make these perceptions. 80% of communication is body language. Everybody's going to be checking how you move your hand, what you're doing. And you have to realize that it's not because anyone means badly. It's just because it's what you do, and it's what people do to you. The best way is to prepare. And once you're prepared, you've got a higher chance of success. Prepare means know your subject. Prepare means go to the place where if you're doing a big audience and whatever, go to the stage, just walk it and see how it feels. So walk there before you go, and then enjoy. I mean, ultimately, if you're talking to one person or to 500 people, you're ultimately talking to yourself. So have fun with it, and use whatever your style is. The style could be having a little bit of ad lib. I've seen very good presenters, and I love watching TED Talks. I love watching different styles. I don't think you can force a style on somebody, but you can give them, like, it's almost like, the Caran d'Ache sort of pencils, choose your color, because and everybody can be effective in a different way.
And I think now when everyone has devices, we can all record ourselves, and we can record ourselves and it can be really uncomfortable, can't it, to see ourselves. But blind spots otherwise remain blind for a reason. That's why they're called blind spots. So we get to see ourselves. Are there filler words? I mean, I historically, when I was recorded, and I still have a tendency to do this, I speak very fast, but it's only when you get to see yourself back, the things that might have been invisible before are very much laid bare, so you know what to correct.
Yeah, and also the other fun thing once you start to master it is playing with the audience, looking at different people. Depending, obviously, if you're in a board meeting, you're not going to sort of have that light heart. But if you're on stage, you can do a different thing. If you have an ability to bring a story from something else, there does need to be a narrative to your presentation, because, like everything, it's about the storytelling. And so you have to just know what that story. So start with whatever you want to go to. Maybe, again, this is the analyst in me. I used to have 3 minutes to get on the hoot and on talk to 300 traders every morning, and I had to tell them what to do. So you have to tell them, you have to say why that is, and then bring it back. And it's a very simple formula. I'm not as robotic as saying, I'm going to give you 3 reasons, but I'm doing it in my mind. And then you just sort of get into that flow. And it's almost like exercising a muscle. It's like going to the gym. It comes naturally. And then you just have fun. You can really see that the presenters I most like, they really enjoy it. They really enjoy it.
That also is impacting the audience. I then feel calm. I feel more at ease.
They say, anxiety is about living in the future. It's the uncertainty of what that means, because you don't control. You're not controlling your environment, etc. So the only thing you can do is back to what can you control, and you can only control yourself. You can only control your thoughts, and you can only control the reaction you have to a certain environment or to the change. And that's probably what I would recommend, which is whatever it is in the moment, that too shall pass. So you sort of give yourself that serenity of knowing that too shall pass. It's not permanent. And if it is something that you need to course correct because something is happening, then make sure that thing doesn't happen again in the future. Or if it's something that is wonderful, also make sure that you don't get big-headed about it. Because that's equally bad, right? You can equally get that false sense of hubris, and we've seen and are seeing what that can lead to. It's just that distance between what you can control, what you can't control, and then putting it in perspective. And I'm sure many times in history, everybody that's gone through, and that's the joy of reading history books. You read it and you think, oh my God, I can't imagine what it would have been like to go through that period of time. And human beings all over the world will have been feeling what we are. So the humanity hasn't changed. It's just what we can do about it.
This too shall pass is such an important lesson. I think that anxiety can really bubble up in times of uncertainty and periods of change. And to your point, if we look at history books, they've all been through cycles of. I look at my grandparents. My grandfather went off to war for 4 years. So every generation experiences change. I think it's the pace of it now. So it's people getting comfortable with control the controllables, influence what you can influence, and the things that you can't, like, just don't bleed energy on that, because it's not a good use of time.
That's a good way to put it.
And look, when you reflect back on your career to date, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I love the sector I work in, and just literally having stuck with banking. That's just something which is pretty, it gives me energy, frankly, to think of the cycles that we've gone through. So I've been working in banking now 25, 28 years, the financial crisis, coming out of that, the European sovereign crisis, COVID, and now with this. There are many times, especially with banking, which is a pretty sort of cold face, let's say, of industry, that you could think, oh my God, this is too much. But actually going through that and getting that experience, starting to have the pattern recognition of that, and actually enjoying every stage of that difference, that proverbial, what would you tell your younger self? if you were to look back, which is, first of all, you have 30 to 40 years. Pace yourself because people tend to sort of go in sprints. And you can do little mini sprints, but you can't be sprinting all the time. So pace yourself, and know that they'll be that. You also mentioned careers are not linear. And so you need to know when to sprint and when to take a bit more of a pause and grab those opportunities, because they're not going to be there all the time. So don't shy away from those. Maybe that's another thing as well from a career that certainly there have been two or three. And I hate the term lean in because it's sort of associated with, but it's basically grabbing those and not fearing and not wanting to have the answers of everything that comes after that. And my only other one was, because I think of it in blocks almost of decades. Maybe that sounds too much, but if you think you've got sort of 4 decades, and if you're lucky enough to be healthy and still able to do, then actually think of the different stages of your career, almost like quartiles. Like and there was somebody, and this was at a course I once went. So it was said to me, which is, think 10 years ahead. Where would you like to be? Then look back at where you are today and think whether you are on that right path to get there. It's a very safe way of doing career planning, in a way that then sort of forces you, because if you're where you are today is so far away from where you want to get, you have to course correct and then be honest to yourself. So that's what it is. I think that it's like life. It comes in phases. There's different aspects to it, and embrace those different stages.
That pace yourself you mentioned is so important, because I think we can find ourselves as corporate athletes sprinting a daily marathon, which, it will lead to burnout. So that intentionality, that consciousness around pacing ourselves is so important. One of the things that's really struck me, and it's you energetically, and you've shared this word several times, which is joy, like enjoy. And it doesn't mean that every day is fireworks and rainbows, but on balance, we work, our, life to find joy. There has to be a love for what we do.
Yeah. For me, it's the subject matter, banking. I'm a self-declared nerd. I'm a banking nerd, and that's fine. And I was lucky enough to get into that industry. I didn't start. I started off with other sectors as well, and I just chose banking. At a certain stage of my career, it was a tough one, because you were going through financial crisis. They were sort of seen as the evil in society. So sort of reconciling the fact that I loved a sector that then was seen as that was not easy, and having that socially sort of as an aspect, but the joy then actually comes back to what it is that you're trying to build. So if you have a small team, a big team, a big business, whatever that is, to be able to take that, grow that, and actually see a team deliver much more than they ever thought they were going to achieve. That is extraordinary. To have the power of a team that knows each other, that they don't even need to speak, but they come. It's almost like a football team. They come on the pitch, and each one plays to their role. The goalie, the defender, or whatever, and they do it at a level which is extraordinary, more than what they think they could do. Now that is joy.
It's bringing the right people together. Because there's lots of football teams, but it's having that right culture and dynamic that elevates that. It's that 1 + 1 = 11. It's the force multiplier when you bring good people together. And I think as leaders, it's about empowering them and then getting out of the way. Because if you're too in the weeds, then you haven't got the right people in the seats.
And then celebrating them. I mean, to see them grow, to see them perform, to see them essentially be recognized and rewarded. I mean, there is nothing more joyful than that. Often, some of the career moves I had to do is because I had such good team members that I needed to move so that they got the roles that I was in. And that's also a great thing to do. Never be afraid of having people that are literally as good, if not better, than you in that team. And then that forces you as well, because you're like, okay, well, I've got to keep going so that this person keeps going. And, there's 2 or 3 occasions I've had to do that.
But that's everything you as a leader as well, that ego is parked at the door. It's servant leadership, recognizing, okay, well, these people have got the ability to step up, and I don't want to get in their way. So I need to think about, pushing myself forwards as well. So we love to end with a quick fire, and part of these are work focused and or career focused. Others are just getting to know you a little bit more. So the first question I have, the first album you ever bought.
So it was, I don't know the name, but it was The Police. So, but I don't know the name of the album.
Okay, so Sting's The Police. Is he yeah,
Sting,
Sting.
yes, before he went, but he was part of a group called The Police, and it had things like Roxanne and whatever. But I don't know the name of the. But I remember I had a yellow Walkman, a Sony yellow Walkman, and it was 1980s, and I loved listening to it.
Okay, if you could use only one app on your phone for a day, what would it be and why?
Probably Ocado, so that I could have the shopping done for my children. It's the one I go to. Every time I have 5 minutes, I just go back there and top it up. So for the family shopping, that would be the one I can't live without.
When you have 10 minutes, what do you do for yourself?
This sounds a bit, but I go get a tea. Frankly, I go get a tea and I sit. I sit quietly. I don't tend to listen to too much music. I don't like just having. I tend to just like to be in my own voice. But I'll go sit down, have a tea. Look, if I've got a book that I'm reading, I'll just go back to it. But 10 minutes is often not enough. Just actually sit with myself.
You were the one who introduced me to the term, creating the connecting the dots time, and being very purposeful, having that in your diary as well, which is, that time and space to think and to kind of step out to then see the things that you might not be able to see when you're kind of in the weeds.
Yeah, I will need more than 10 minutes for that. So if you really want to be doing that, it probably is an hour. And I actually do have blocks of time and it says no meetings here, and they know what that means.
And again, it have to be purposeful and intentional at creating that space, because otherwise it's easy to give that time away. It's easy for people to take that from us. But that is ultimately having that connecting the dots time is a springboard to do your best work.
Correct. One thing before I do any of that connecting the dots, I also have to have an external hour or an external something. It's all too easy in a corporate job that you're sort of stuck, and I 80 or 90% of my day is with internal meetings, whether that's with directs, not directs, etc. Always have an external hour, which that means meeting a client, reading something, having a podcast. Just you need to have stimuli for pattern recognition. And that's when the growth happens. And then you can go back to connecting the dots, because otherwise you're not fertile ground to do that.
I love that. You need to have for pattern recognition. That is definitely a very powerful soundbite. You mentioned your children, the Ocado shop. One lesson you've learned from your children?
Always have your facts right, because they will fact check you. So at our meal times, if I say something, literally they'll come back the next meal and say, no, mummy, that was not right. I checked it and that was not the right. So just, make sure you've got your facts right, because they will correct you.
I love that. What your parents are proud of?
I guess my courage to break the mold of what I was expected to do. Probably courage in the way. So I got married to my husband's Egyptian, so very different culture, very different background. And touch wood, we're still happily married. And courage to be in an industry that maybe wasn't expected to be the type of industry that would have necessarily a foreign woman. Yeah, I think courage.
And if you hadn't have done finance, what industry or sector would you have gone into?
When I was doing the career fairs and the discussion with career office, they had literally, and I'm not that old, but they had like name cards, and they'd go in alphabetical order. So it was accounting, banking, consulting. So consulting was the one. So I stayed with ABC. I didn't go beyond that. I tried banking and consulting. And actually, I thought I was going to be a consultant. And I probably could have ended up being a consultant as well. But now that I think about consulting, they don't have for the consultant, but they don't have the technical aspects of what banking has. So between banking and consulting, I could easily have done one or the other.
And then last question, if there was one piece of advice that you would want to share with leaders today that you think could have the most impact, what would that piece of advice be?
Continue to push the boundaries of what you think you know, and have the humility to understand that actually the future self, your future self, will depend on how much you're learning from others and how much you're changing as well. And that's actually a superpower, not a weakness.
I love that. Well, look, Carla, this has been such an enjoyable conversation. I could speak to you for hours. And you bring such wonderful energy and humility. And I said your track record is extraordinary. And I think you've shared so many wonderful sound bites today, which we'll be capturing and sharing with our community. So I want to thank you wholeheartedly for receiving the award. And I want to thank you so much for your time today and sharing so many incredible lessons.
Thank you, Georgie. You've made it so easy as well. So I could have carried on. And I think it's also the energy and what you bring to this. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Carla.
Thank you. Have a good day.